So, we've got a number 1 deluxe meal. Is there anything else I can get you?
Yeah, I'd also like a good night's sleep. Maybe something like the I didn't struggle all night with my uncomfortable CPAP mask.
Sir, I think what you're looking for is Inspire. It's an implant that works inside your body to treat sleep apnea without a CPAP.
Come on!
He sounds hangry. Inspire, sleep apnea innovation. Inspire is not for everyone. Talk to your doctor to see if it's right for you, and review important safety information at inspiresleep.com.
I think I want to hear this.
Sports Daily is on KFH.
Welcome back in, everybody. It is Sports Daily here on KFH. Glad to be here with you on this Tuesday, on this election day, on this Major League Baseball trade deadline day. Lots going on. Speaking of the trade deadline, the Royals make another move. They send the reliever Jose Cuas to the Chicago Cubs for Nelson Velasquez, who you've probably never heard of. He is described, and I've seen this multiple times, he's kind of that, not AAA, but 4A type player. He's fringy. Hit 241 in the big leagues this season. Very small sample size. So I get it. It's sort of a swap for a swap. I don't know that Cuas was going to bring much. They're making moves. They're trying to get pieces and maybe a reclamation project here for a guy that has had some pop. No issue with the deal. Doesn't move the needle at all for me, Tommy. I think that, we're still clinging to, Barlow and Hernandez potentially bringing. I mean, what do we hope for? Somebody's a top 5 prospect from somebody within their system? I mean, is that a tangible goal here that we can hope for the Royals? Is that it's not another, AAA player that, isn't going to last? That's kind of what we're seeing here. But when it comes to their 2 remaining most valuable trade assets, I think you've got to start shooting for some prospects here. And somebody's top 5 feels like a decent benchmark.
I'm wondering if really at the end of the day, the Royals are having a hard time getting the offers that they want in return for Barlow and Hernandez, right? So, and JJ Piccolo has, said as much. He did an interview yesterday where, he said that it almost seems like they're having a harder time getting the guys that they would like. And that's always the way it's going to be at the trade deadline, right? Like people are going to be playing hardball for a while until you get down to the final couple of hours left in the for trading. And at that point, all bets are off. But I don't know. I think that this last trade, getting the minor leaguer from the Cubs, okay. I mean, you traded a kind of a middling pitcher that isn't going to do a whole lot for you long-term for a guy that maybe can come in and do something for you down the road. Really, it's been extremely underwhelming so far, I would say, for the Royals and trades. They can still make that up today.
Well,
they can do something with Barlow and Hernandez.
Because they don't have a lot to trade is the problem, right? And that's one of the most disappointing things about this year is it just hasn't produced that. Like, in years past, they've been able to, salvage some of these veterans and move those guys, and I still haven't. I need to gone to look at what they got last year and how any of those players have fared. But, you're not trading Bobby Witt Jr., so Salvador Perez, we've discussed, why that's a challenge, and then that's it. That was it, other than the guys we see. Chapman was the most tradable piece. And they got a good return, I think, on Chapman. I'm fine with their return on Chapman. Desperation, you hope, works to their favor. The best thing that could have happened to the Royals, by the way, is that the Angels became buyers and not sellers because they've been as active as anybody. That's putting pressure not only on Texas, but now on Houston, who might become a buyer. That's been the best thing to me, to the sellers, was the Angels' decision. The Cubs are adding, the Mets are subtracting, which has been an interesting development. And then you've got teams that are sort of doing both, and the AL East has stayed competitive. So there should be enough of a market out there where somebody, as the deadline approaches and they haven't made the move yet, gets just a little bit more desperate maybe than they would have been yesterday at 5 o'clock. And so hopefully for the Royals' sake, as we get closer to, isn't it a 5 o'clock deadline today? Once we approach that somebody's missed out on somebody. Like for the Royals,
Yeah.
best case scenario is that the Astros, some combination of two of the Astros, Angels, and Rangers keep making moves here, and it adds pressure to the third where they're like, all right, we got to go get Barlow or Hernandez or both. Like, we got to go. And that's the other thing, too. Let me say this. If I'm the Royals, too, I shop those guys together first. I want one good prospect. I don't need a handful of meh unless they're super young. Just, I'll give you both of these guys if we can at least get a prospect that projects as an everyday player, right? Like, take both these relievers because that does help a lot of teams to get both of those guys.
And there are a couple of other teams that are now no longer sellers where the reliever market is getting a little bit smaller. The Padres, for example, it doesn't look like they're going to sell. I think they're going to go for it. They swept the Rangers, as you know, over the weekend. And, so that kind of puts them back into a place where they feel like they can challenge for a wild card spot. And there were a couple of pitchers that had been, I think, on the market. Josh Hader, one of them. And it sounds like the Padres were listening to offers on him, but their price tag was way too high. And I think ultimately he's going to stay there. So the more you've got teams that are not selling their assets away, you're going to have a little bit of a better market for your relievers. And so I think things like that, that's definitely good for the Royals because we've known that they're going to be sellers all along. There are only a handful of teams in Major League Baseball that we knew that about. I mean, as early as probably May that they were going to be sellers. So if you can weed out all the teams that were right on the fringe, that does make the market better for your guys.
Yeah, it is. There is reason for, small optimism today if you're the Royals. They still have to execute it, right? They still have to get it right. And there is a ton of pressure on this front office. I don't think they've had a real opportunity to do much this year with what they've got. The Chapman deal was fine. I actually, you know what? Let me say this because we haven't given them much credit for anything this year. I do give them credit for going and being aggressive and making that move early. Now, you have to time this right because at this point, doesn't it just become a timing issue? Like, how do you time this to where you either, one of two things, let a team feel like they're getting a leg up on their direct competitor by getting the deal done, or you catch the other side of it and catch that team in desperation as they feel like we got to do something. Like we have to do something now. The Royals are in a position of strength. You still got to execute though. And, Quas for Velasquez, that's not the needle mover. I would imagine if Velasquez ever has any impact in Kansas City, it will be as like a fourth outfielder, right? And that's fine, but it doesn't do anything for the overall trajectory or future of this franchise.
How many times have you said the phrase, the Royals are in a position of strength? I mean, you just said that. Like that hasn't happened.
Definitely not any times this year.
Recently, right? But I do agree with you that and maybe a position of strength is a little bit too far to go. But they are at least in a position where it can be fair. The trade can be fair. They shouldn't. And this is where I'm going to come back to when we do the postmortem on the trade deadline. If the Royals get fleeced with these relievers that are still on the market with Barlow and Hernandez, at that point, that is a total indictment of J.J. Piccolo in the front office. A total indictment because they are in a position right now. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if I would go so far to say they're in a position of strength, but at least for it to be fair, a trade to be fair for them. If they get fleeced for them, like the Nicky Lopez trade, if that duplicates with Scott Barlow and Carlos Hernandez, at that point, get rid of everybody in the front office because it didn't have to be that way.
Well, it's just like you have to have something. Like the only hope right now in the organization is Bobby Witt Jr. You got to have something, right? And if you're going to be this bad, you have to at least improve the farm system. And then you had the draft, and the perception on the draft was awful. Whatever. We'll see how that pans out. There just hasn't been anything. And so, yeah, maybe getting a decent type prospect back at the deadline this year, because let's also be honest, Tommy. Like Barlow and Hernandez are not the biggest names on the market by any means.
No.
They're just handy for somebody, and maybe even more than that out of desperation. Like I'll talk to you as a Rangers fan right now. I feel like the Rangers are in a position to be just a little bit desperate to go do something like that. These aren't frontline, can't miss, whatever guys. But, man, they need so much that it's like, would I be okay as a fan of that organization to overpay just a little bit to get those guys if I can't get something else done? Like, if I can't get Josh Hader at the back end, maybe I can get somebody at the front end of the bullpen to push everybody back a slot or something. Yes, yes, absolutely. And you've got to do that if you're the Royals.
I'll tell you also, as a Braves fan, they've got the best record in baseball. Their bullpen needs some help. They've had a lot of injuries in that bullpen. Guys like Dylan Lee and AJ Minter and Joe Jimenez have all went down with injuries. And if you're going to make a deep run to a pennant and then a World Series, you need to have some good back end bullpen help. They went out and they picked up, I think, one or two relievers in the past couple of weeks or so, but you could always use some more. And we know that the Braves and Royals have a pipeline, at least of talking about trades. They did it with Nicky Lopez. The Braves have a pretty deep farm system. That's why it was so surprising that Nicky Lopez, the Royals didn't demand a prospect in return, and they got a below average or I guess bad left-handed major league pitcher reliever in that return. So I don't know. Like, I would be okay too. If a team like the Braves went after guys like Scott Barlow and Carlos Hernandez, there should be a fairly robust market for those two pitchers. And the Royals have got to get something in return for them where you can look back on it and say, okay, that made sense.
The problem I have is I don't know how much or how attractive those players are to other teams right now. Like, I don't have the time to sit there and compare them to every other reliever that's on the market right now. So that matters too, in fairness. Like, where do they rank with the pool of eligible people? But waiting till right before the deadline does seem like the most advantageous thing for them to do. So you can, like, I think their best case is to get somebody who feels like they got to just get something done. And if they do them both together or separately, whatever gets them at least one player you feel like could be an everyday player at the big day level, at the big league level. That's what you got to get. 869-1240 Royals fans, what do you think there? We'll come back. We'll hit some of the other headlines of the day as we make our way through this Tuesday, Election Day edition of Sports Daily.